All right, guys. Happy Wednesday night. I am so happy to be joined by Kyle and Chris again for Refounding Fathers. Kind of a quick turn episode that we just felt like we had to do because, we got that inspiring intro, and I feel like I needed to watch that after the train wreck that I saw last night that was those presidential debates. And talking to you guys, I was like, man, we've got to do a show on this because everyone is talking about it. We were talking about the debates ahead of time, making our predictions, and I've got to know what's on, y'all's minds. So, Chris, Kyle, welcome. Man, like, where do we start? I don't
Great to
even
be
know.
here. Yeah, hopefully this will be, if you hated the debate last night, those watching, hopefully this will be the opposite of that. We will not interrupt each other so much. We will not insult each other. We will not accuse each other's children of various crimes and misdeeds.
Oh my,
So stay tuned.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Thanks for having us, Wes. I think Jake Tapper had the comment of the night. I don't know if you guys saw it. CNN's Jake Tapper said this was a hot mess inside of a dumpster fire inside of a train wreck, and that was his analysis of the
I mean,
of the
I was
debate.
just thinking, like I expected there to be a back and forth. I expected a heavyweight fight. I knew that these two guys didn't hate each other. I'd heard they weren't going to shake hands. Like, oh, it's going to be, but I expected the decorum to last a little longer. And then when it got to the point that like neither one could speak, especially Biden couldn't even like get a few seconds to get words out, and then the moderator Chris Wallace going back with Trump, I was like, what is even going on? And is it that they can't do this or that they won't? Because we have this show all the time, and like you said, Chris, like I think we have demonstrated a way for liberals and conservatives and libertarians to talk to each other. Why can't people who do this full time as a job, especially running the media and the country, figure out a better way to do it? So, getting into this debate, and I'm bringing up an image of it right now as people saw, both Trump and Biden on the screen just like this. And like I said, you thought, they were going to each get time to talk and give their positions, but that really, really didn't happen. Um, what do you think this means, guys? I gotta wonder as the one of, I believe there's only two actual presidential debates. Next week we get the vice president, so there's really only going to be one more chance for these guys to talk as we head into election day. Chris, what just your hot take? What do you think the results of this debate are going to be for the election?
I'm not sure. I think that I can't see many people who are undecided voters coming away from this and thinking, man, I can't wait to, this has changed my mind. I would like to vote for Trump now. Just because, you could kind of both sides this thing. And Biden certainly had his moments of unprofessionalism and his temper coming through.
Yeah.
But, and a lot of people have dismissed and criticized Chris Wallace's performance as the moderator as well. But I think that kind of ignores the elephant in the room, or as John Mulaney calls Trump, the horse in the hospital, because really the problem on that stage was caused by one man who just sucks all the air out of the room. And the problems that people had with Chris Wallace and with Joe Biden's performance were problems that they had with how they were reacting to Trump, who
Yeah.
creates these situations just to get people to react.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see many undecided voters coming out and being incredibly enthused about Joe Biden. I do see and have heard from undecided voters saying they don't want to vote at all anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's
I
right.
do think overall this was worse for Trump.
Yeah, so we got a couple comments here from Roger, he's talking about the media bias and that it really was a free for all with effectively no moderator. So what we're going to do, Chris, is we're going to get into and Rogers, we're going to get into each person because there was only three and they were all talking the entire time. So we're going to kind of break down really, the failures of each. So what about you, Kyle? Before we get into that, what other big takes do you have on this overall?
Yeah, I don't think anyone who pays attention to politics, who's been paying attention to Trump and Biden, really expected some great academic civil debate, filled with decorum and positive rhetoric. But I don't think anyone expected that. I don't think anyone expected it to be as terrible as it was. And honestly, the first 3 or 4 minutes, everyone seemed pretty tame. And I thought to myself, man, maybe everyone's just going to keep it low energy and and civil. And then, man, about 4 or 5 minutes in, Trump started interrupting him like crazy, and they started getting after it for sure. Um, to kind of echo what Chris said, I don't see this really swaying many voters at all. I think the people who are already, for Trump are still with Trump. I don't think he did anything to damage that. They got pretty much the performance they wanted. Even people who I know are Trump fans, thought he was probably pretty much over the top. People who are Biden fans still pretty firmly in the Biden camp. But really, I mean, I thought it was mostly unwatchable.
Yeah.
I thought, honestly, as bad as Trump was, and he was very bad, Biden only had to prove that he was competent enough just to overcome that. He didn't have to be very smart or very competent to score some points, and I don't think he did that last night either. So I don't think anyone's walking away with a moral victory or a campaign bump victory either in the polls. So
Yeah, yeah. And if you guys are watching this, for those that are watching it live, go ahead and drop us some more comments, Roger, or anybody else.
yeah.
We're going to be going through those. We really want to hear your thoughts, where you come from, what you think, because I mean, like our Facebook, our social media was just blowing up with comments the whole time. And then of course, the three of us, I was texting you guys as we were watching this, and I was doing the same thing with John and the other members of our project, just being like, what are we seeing? Because it's just so different than anything else. But let's get into the specifics, because that's really what I want to do in this show. Is everybody's given their initial takes like we just did, but let's take it a step further and let's kind of break down each of these individuals and see what we would have done differently, and where they went wrong in doing so. So starting with Chris Wallace, who was the moderator, I got to tell you, so Roger's talking about how there effectively was no moderator. In hindsight, I think he was a terrible choice for this, because you think about the fact that he just had an interview with Trump before, where he was trying to hold him, accountable, or on several things and be tough against him. And then I don't know if he's really had that type of interview, at least recently, with any Democrat, especially Biden, because Biden hasn't been doing that many interviews. And so to have someone who was recently in the news and then try to be objective, like that's really hard to do when he already has a reputation on Fox News for kind of being counterculture. And then I feel like he showed that several times when he was, calling out Trump and trying to get, questions that said, you have no plan. And Trump's like, yes, I do have a plan. Like they can't even get through the questions because they don't even agree on the assumptions. And, I feel to an extent, I feel like Trump would have challenged that with anyone, but especially with Chris Wallace, whom he has a history, a volatile history, and a recent one at that. So, Kyle, I mean, what do you agree with that, or where am I wrong?
No, man, I think you're right. Chris Wallace, I actually had high hopes coming into the debate. He did have the rapport with Trump, having interviewed him at least 1 or 2 times for Fox, I think more than that. And Wallace, known as a bit more of a moderate, I think the Trump folks would say he's pretty leftist. I think most of the the hardcore Fox News watchers would say he's definitely more on the liberal side of the Fox News hosts. And so I thought honestly it was a good choice because you get a Fox News guy, but also someone who's a little bit more moderate. And just thought he did an absolutely horrendous job. And maybe that's not his fault. I mean, some of it is obviously trying to corral a man who's as charismatic as Trump and as audacious as Biden as well. I mean, that's not an enviable position for any of them to be in. I mean, I definitely feel like he necessarily wasn't one-sided necessarily, but definitely was Biden's teammate in a lot of those different questions. It seemed like, but I don't know if I can blame him for that. The way that Trump was going after him.
What do you think, Chris?
I think he did about as well as could be expected. I think he was a really good choice. Yes, he is known by many Fox News viewers as being more on the liberal end of Fox News, but that is still definitely right of center. There's really no one else on Fox News who has his level of credibility. There was someone who recently left the network because it had turned so far into right-wing extremism and Trumpism. I don't know if there's any reporter who would have been a better choice that Trump would have maybe felt more comfortable with, who wasn't just, a Trump propagandist. And I think he, I saw one comment on the page that said something like, Trump wasn't just debating Biden, Trump was debating Chris Wallace.
What
But
it
the
felt like
issue
to
with
me.
that is
Yep.
that Trump is debating reality constantly. He doesn't come into a question with the same premises because his premises are factually untrue. It's simply a fact that Trump has been talking about repealing the Affordable Care Act for years without ever announcing a real legitimate health care plan. And his line throughout has been, "Oh, well, we'll have a beautiful plan within 2 weeks." For the last 4 years, he's been saying this. So I think it was good for Chris Wallace to point that out. I think that he did challenge Biden a lot as well. The fact is, though, policy aside, there isn't as much to challenge Biden on because while Biden may be, a politician who stretches the truth or lies occasionally, he's not Trump, and Trump is in his own league when it comes to that. So I don't know if there is a way for an honest moderator to retain credibility without challenging Trump a little bit more than his opponent.
I don't think that he had the structure in place. I think that Chris Wallace was trying to manage this on the basis of his personality, and like you're saying, Trump has a very like bombastic, forceful personality, and like you're gonna need more than a Chris Wallace to like balance that out. And I just couldn't believe that is he was like begging for them to adhere to the structure. Like you said, you were gonna give us 2 minutes. Like
Yeah.
you're on
Yeah.
live national
Yeah.
TV, like like, it
Dealing
reminds
with the
me of
bully
like
on the schoolyard, yeah, on
yeah, it's
national
like
TV.
I
It
don't know if
wasn't
you
a
guys
good
are
look. Yeah, it
familiar
wasn't a good
with
look.
like the Frost Nixon interviews where like Frost breaks the contract in the middle of them like doing the interview, and that wasn't even live. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, walk out? Like, come on, he's begging for it.
Right.
If you don't, and then again, not having a commercial break for them to reset, I think was a poor choice,
Yeah, absolutely.
and then just like switch out the moderator too, like having one guy for an hour and a half, unless it's freaking like someone that is above all of this, and I can't imagine who that would be. Like they're not going to have, unless it was like previous presidents or something. Maybe like you're just not going to be able to tame some of the most forceful like personalities in politics. So
I think Joe Rogan came out the winner of last night's debate, didn't
right,
he?
right, like
Right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think
Someone who's just completely outside of the whole political spectrum maybe is someone who we need
yeah,
to do these things. Yeah.
I'm
What do
looking
you
at.
think
Go ahead.
about the suggestion of muting mics at the next debate?
Which I don't know if they would ever agree to that, right? And at this point in the process, like, yeah, I don't know. I remember seeing commentary. We're about to switch over here to Trump. That was questioning. I think this was from the Atlantic and even conservative sources. That was questioning the usefulness of a debate at all. So we're really at that point where the fundamental purpose of this is not even, being agreed to. Um, I'm looking here at a couple comments here from Roger. Trump would never get the probing questions asked, so he had to ask them himself. I think that's what I kind of agree with you, Roger. Is that you have the assumptions embedded in the question about certain things. Trump challenges those assumptions, and some level of that is can be critical thinking. But and he's trying to do that. But I my problem with Trump, as we kind of segue into that, was he didn't even let Wallace or Biden get their thoughts out the majority of the time, right? It's like
Yeah.
Trump, and he did this amazingly in the Republican primaries. So you remember when like Megyn Kelly is like throwing stones at him and is like, "You've called women, fat slobs and all this other stuff."
Hmm.
He lets her get the question out, and then he waits for the comedic timing, and he's like, "Only Rosie O'Donnell," right? And then
Yeah.
everybody like starts laughing and stuff. And whether you agree or disagree with like him saying that, you have to like respect the fact that he had comedic timing as someone who's been on TV the majority of his life. Where was the timing? And so that's my initial criticism of Trump. I'm frustrated that we didn't get more policy. I'm frustrated that he didn't get to talk about like his accomplishments more and accomplishments of his administration and the direction that they were going. But even before you get to all of that, like what happened to this guy who had such a sense of mastery over debates? I mean, he took down Rubio, who's kind of like the golden boy of the Republican party at one time. He took on Ted Cruz, who's been debating since he was 4 years old. Like who's
That's right.
essentially like a package like debater, like right? Like he's like a
Mhm.
wind up doll and just debates, right? Like,
That's right. Yeah.
and yet Trump took him down. He took him to school. I mean, incredible that this guy who has so much experience kind of lost touch with. I mean, let Biden self-destruct, because to me that was very clear. It goes back to a point you were saying, Kyle, of there were very, very many times that I saw where Biden said things that like clearly wasn't the intention of what he was initially going for, and yet you
Yeah.
couldn't even follow that because immediately Trump was jumping in there like tearing it apart, like let it sit, like let it look
Yeah.
stupid, and then wait for your
Yeah,
turn to
if
be
he would have
like,
given Biden just a couple of minutes, Biden would have talked himself into about 17 gaffes and about four
yeah,
pickles he couldn't get out of. But instead, Trump went out there and just talked and interrupted and tried to bully and own the conversation. Didn't give
yeah.
Biden any time to hang himself.
I could not believe that.
Yeah.
So, what else did you see, Kyle? What other opinions do you have? We got a couple other comments here. I'll let you know as you go on.
Yeah. I thought, there were some good comments made. I think among both candidates, I thought Trump's line, "I've done more in 47 months than you've done in 47 years," or however that played. I thought that went well. I thought the whole back and forth with Trump having to disown or what's the phrase I'm looking for? Um,
Disavow.
Yeah.
yeah, disavow, however you want to phrase it, white supremacists. I thought that was a pretty big blunder on everyone's part. At one point he said, "Who do you want me to do? Who do you want me to do?" And
The
he
Proud
should have
Boy.
just come outright and said it. Instead, had a big gaffe that's now being taken out of context by everyone on the left, saying he's telling them to stand by for some sort of big race war. And obviously, that's not what Trump said he was going for. And
Yep.
just a big
Yeah.
mess. And I don't think he scores any points going after Hunter Biden. By the way, I don't think
Like,
that looked good at all for anybody.
yeah, like if
Yeah.
if I had been in there advising Trump and things like that, obviously they practice these things before the debates occur. The question of race is going to come up because the left is constantly talking about it. You would
Mhm.
have Trump say, "Listen, let me tell you about my record on race. Let me tell you about Kim Klacik, right?
Exactly right.
Out
Yep.
in Baltimore, who just came by the White House and that I've endorsed and I think is going to win. She's doing great work. She supports me. I support her, and she's going to transform Baltimore from a Democratic wasteland to a Republican stronghold." And like, talk about
Yeah.
that, like
Yeah.
talk about
So
that.
yeah, and I mean, you're asking what happened, and who said that Trump can't change, because he clearly has in the last 4 years. 4 years ago, he was thrilled to be on a debate stage with Hillary Clinton. He was having the time of his life. He
I
had never
agree.
gotten more attention.
That's right.
He had never gotten more media attention, specifically, which is the one thing he craves more than life itself. And if you watched him last night, he was like lumbering out of the shadows at the beginning of that debate, like the Phantom of the Opera,
Hmm.
with just a scowl on his face from the very beginning. He was clearly miserable, which good. But he didn't want to be there. He didn't want to have a debate. He felt demeaned by the very idea that he should have to debate or defend himself. And that was his stance pretty much the entire night that I felt coming off of him in waves.
Hmm.
As for his comments about the Proud Boys, I mean, that's what happens when you refuse to make a strong denunciation, is you end up making this meaningless statement that can be interpreted not just by the left, but by the Proud Boys themselves as an endorsement, saying
Yeah.
stand back and stand by.
Uh,
Unfortunately, the Proud Boys are taking that as a recruiting tool.
they sure
And
are. I looked at that last night. They sure are. They're
Mm.
like, yep,
fair or not,
unbelievable.
Donald Trump has been the #1 recruiting tool for white nationalist and white supremacist groups over the past 4 years.
Un-
And that is something that he has not combated, that he has not fought, because he is afraid to denounce anyone who he believes could vote for him. And that's the generous interpretation. The less generous interpretation, which is supported by many of his comments even today, saying, "There go the suburbs," basically appealing to that racist dog whistle of "there goes the neighborhood." The less generous interpretation is that he is a racist
yeah.
and has common ground with these racist groups.
Yeah.
So it is
Let me
what it is.
let me
It's a
get
quote
to
mark person.
a couple comments here. We got a bunch of them coming in. So one from Mike, one from Roger. So Roger's saying what is remarkable is that Trump is on record numerous times having denounced white supremacy. I agree, Roger, but this was the chance to do that in front of everyone. I mean, everyone that I know who has any interest whatsoever in politics was tuning into this, and even people who didn't. My wife, for example, got home from work a little bit late, and I was watching this on my iPad, and I backed it up, and she was like, "What's going on? I want to see this." I mean, the entire country wanted to see this. Many people saw this as a defining, very, very important in American politics because of what we've been through this year. So this is your chance. This is your chance to come out and do this. And there have been times that he has done that. Maybe it doesn't convince him on the left, or even that many moderates, but there's a better way to do this that Roger Trump has demonstrated and yet did not do, which was shocking to me. I mean, I just did it for you right there off the top of my head. You could say so many things as, I have gone against the Republican norms since I first came into the party. I won Wisconsin and I went in places they said I couldn't win, and I'm going to do it with this election by appealing to the black voters who, I've provided more jobs than any Democrat. Like, he does that thing. He bragged
Yeah.
about his, and yet he didn't do that here. So that's one. Two, Mike asked, do you think that this was part of his strategy, like coming out hard and interrupting Biden constantly? I think is what he's talking about. To come out strong at the first debate and then settle down on the next one. And I'll let you answer that one, Kyle. If that was his strategy, Mike, it was a bad one
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
if you're
No,
dealing
I don't
with
think that was a strategy.
if
Yeah, I don't think that was a strategy at all. I think that the strategy should have been coming in was to let Biden talk himself into the
I
ground,
agree.
let him make a fool of himself, and instead Trump came out and tried to bully him, and that should have been the strategy. Whether that is his strategy, I don't think that is his strategy. No. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. No, I don't think that's a strategy. I don't think it's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I think his strategy should have been like, you seriously want to go for this guy? Like he can't even put a sentence together, and then to
Yeah,
jump on him every single time that he says something that if you read it isn't coherent. Maybe you hear it and it's like, wait, what? And then
sure.
you read it like, well, that was 200,000 people have died. How many of them have survived? Things like that. Like, just stop from
Yeah.
there. Did anybody hear that? Like, do you think that this guy should be
Well,
the president? But
well,
that's
I
not what he
mean,
did.
Going back to Mike's question, there's only two debates, only two presidential
Yeah,
debates. So it's not like there's a long time debate strategy where he's got three or four really to kind of hone a complete cohesive strategy.
yeah,
He's got two chances and he blew the first one big
yeah.
time.
Go ahead, Chris, and then we'll
and I
switch to
think,
Biden. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, well, back to Trump really quick. I think that go saying that he had this long-term strategy
Yeah,
implies way too much long-term planning ability to the mind of Donald Trump. And I think his strategy was to let Biden make a fool of himself and not be able to finish sentences and come across as a doddering old man. But it was pretty clear, and we talked about this on our last show,
yeah,
that going into the debate, he already knew that that strategy would not work, and that he had set expectations far too low. Yes, Biden did have his senior moments at this debate, but he was not the dementia-addled uh, crypt keeper that Trump has been trying to make him out to be. And I think Trump panicked and he choked. To use the parlance that Trump has used to describe police officers involved in shootings of unarmed black people, he choked. And his attacks didn't even come across as coherent. He was simultaneously trying to accuse Biden of being too tough on crime and also not tough enough on crime. He was simultaneously trying to accuse Biden of being a product of the left and also losing the left. He was, attacking Hunter Biden for, getting jobs overseas that he was not qualified for, which didn't register to anyone who is not up to date on the, Q adjacent conspiracy theories regarding Hunter Biden. He never connected that back to this argument that he made to when he, the thing he got impeached for, which
yeah,
was trying to essentially frame the Bidens and say that Joe Biden was giving special treatment to foreign companies or foreign governments, and that this was some kind of pay to play scheme.
yeah,
He never actually made that connection, And I think people who were watching the debates who weren't on all of the propaganda surrounding that were just left scratching their heads, wondering why the hell should I care about Hunter Biden and him getting jobs that he's not qualified for?
Yeah, I mean that's really the difference here is that when you have a national debate, all of a sudden you have people tuning in who may or may not have been following the news cycle as closely as others. I mean, you have a person who, because of COVID, has had to switch jobs and they're working through that. They've had their kids at home, like they're navigating that. They've had to file for unemployment. People are been struggling this year. It's been a rough year. And so forgive them if they haven't been following like what Donald Trump's daughter said or what Hunter Biden did or whatever. Like people have to focus on just getting by through this COVID debacle and just how horrible it's been for the economy, as well as everything. I mean, I've talked to you guys about the hurricane down here in Florida that just like wreaked havoc on Pensacola, wildfires in California, Chris, as you well know. There's so many different things going on, so people aren't following politics closely until tonight when we're all kind of like getting on the same page before we vote. So even if Trump has denounced racism over the past couple of years, this is a huge chance to do it tonight. Even if Joe Biden has made his stance clear with relation to the far left, this is the chance to do it. And as we segue into Biden himself, Alex just gave us a comment and said Biden looked fatigued 30 minutes into this. I mean, I would say 3 minutes into this, because I went back and I was looking at footage of Biden debating Paul Ryan back 8 years ago. And I mean, obviously, younger then, but he was just so much more forceful and present in that debate than he ever was in this one. So you got to think, you got Trump, who's immediately, attacking and interrupting within just a few minutes of the debate, does that the entire night. You got the moderator who's like hostile to him, trying to maintain control, struggling at that. You would think this would be Biden's moment to jump in and just own the stage and be the adult, and all that stuff. I don't know if he did that, which is surprising, like amazing in itself, that where he landed, because there were so many times where he was in the process of saying something that, like, had he been allowed to finish the thought, I don't know if it would have been one. So, I mean, Kyle, is that your thoughts as well, or no?
No, of course it is. Yeah, he didn't even have to be good to score points last night. He didn't even have to be good to land big body blows on Trump last night, and he just could not, despite
Capitalize.
despite Trump's terrible performance, he could not just be competent enough to land these body blows. Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't think it was a good night for him either.
If it was a football game, it would be 2-0. Like someone scored a safety, and that's just because they happened to like land on the ball, like when they were sitting down. Like no one scored a freaking touchdown.
Listen, I came away with one point last night. One big thing that Biden said, and that is that he is the Democratic Party. That's it. That's what I took away.
The Democratic Party, like. If I can stay awake, like, so there were some comments like that, like, what is the meaning of this? Like, maybe Chris, he could have explained that and said, listen, all of these people are, now rallying behind me, kind of, I think back to when Obama had that famous line with Hillary where, he had been pulling her staff, from her, and she was just like, oh, I want to hear this. You got all my people. What are you going to do? And he's like, oh, no, you're going to work for me too. I can't wait to have you on the team, Hillary, And of course she was as his, Secretary of State. And he was just so clever in how he did that. And I was like, I'm not going to vote for the guy, but like, that's a good line.
The
way that Biden was not doing that. Like he was trying, but like, it wasn't that.
Yeah, that line that you are of Obama's that you're comparing Biden's to was charming. And Biden did not really handle that with charm or grace. I do understand the legitimate point that he was making in that, he battled the far left in the primary and he won. And that is something worth pointing out. That is something that he needed to point out. But in other ways, I think that his kind of centrist strategy really backfired. Because I made a prediction the other day that Biden didn't want to talk about court packing. Yeah. And then he was directly asked about court packing and refused to answer the question. Literally said, if I answer the question, that becomes the issue. Well, yeah you're running for president. You need to take a stand on that. And
That's a good point.
there were many moments where he kind of didn't understand the way to combat
Yeah.
Trump, and not only combat Trump, but the way to combat certain tougher questions from Chris Wallace. The only way to not fall into a trap
Yeah.
when you're in politics is to act like it is not a trap.
Yeah.
And he showed fear, and he showed that he was afraid to take a firm stand on these issues of the filibuster, the Green New Deal. He was harsher on the Green New Deal. He did come right out and say the Green New Deal is not my plan,
Yeah.
which is true. But as far as court packing and the filibuster, he could have easily said, there have not always been 9 justices on the Supreme Court. Justices have been added before. They can be added again. That is not a radical policy. It's not something I would like to do. It will be a last resort if the Republicans continue to break norms and force in a Supreme Court justice while people are still voting, which was a point he alluded to a few times, but he didn't connect that to the issue of court packing. He didn't make that seem at all reasonable.
Yeah.
So, and Obama was a master at this.
Yeah.
Obama was a master at taking ideas that many viewed as radical and making them seem reasonable, making them seem approachable, and putting a really positive sheen on them.
Yeah.
Now, if I were to put a positive sheen on his exhaustion and his clear exasperation during the debate, I might say it reflects America's exasperation with where we are right now as a country. It reflects our exasperation with Donald Trump. Yeah. But I realize that's a positive spin. And you're right. He did look tired. He did look old. He is old. And there's no getting around that fact. And there were several times that I wondered how a younger man and even a younger Biden would have handled these same questions and these same attacks by Trump. I did think he missed a lot of really easy counterattacks that he let go by.
Right.
I do think it's worth pointing out that he refused to, he almost went after Trump's children. There was a moment where he said, I could be attacking yours the same way that you're attacking mine and for the same things. But he wouldn't get dragged down quite to that level. So I do think, I've seen a lot of commentary that, this was just 2 old men bickering and having a pissing contest. I do think there is still a standard that Biden is holding himself to where he's not quite sinking to Trump's standard.
Yeah,
Biden's not going to attack Trump's
I'll give you
kids,
that. So
no matter how much Trump is.
I'll give you the part that I thought was the strongest with him, and the part that I thought was the weakest. And I'll tell you why. I will give you this. I thought that Biden was strong when he was defending his son, right? Yeah. It's like you got to pick and choose the times when you really come forceful in the debate. And there's many times he did that poorly. But when Trump went after his son and he talked about drugs and how he's wrestled with drugs, yeah. And then when he called Trump on his other son and his discharge from the military, which, to be clear, he was not dishonorably discharged, right? Because that's a big deal. If you get dishonorably discharged, that is hard for that to happen. You really have to screw up. And that didn't happen with him. And so when he talked about, he got really insulted by that. And he was just like, he did not get dishonorably discharged. He's had a drug problem that he's worked through. These personal, I know people.
Said he was proud of him. Yeah, he said he was proud of him.
Yeah, who have wrestled with things like serious stuff like drugs, right? Like alcohol, like whatever it is. Everybody that I know has gone through, including myself, has gone through difficult times in our life and had to overcome them with help from other people. And like to get mad at that point and to defend yourself, like when your opponent overreaches, that to me like was a good look for him for a few seconds. So I'll give you that one. Where I think he was extremely weak is when they got into Antifa, for example, being an idea versus an organization. Like I know there's been FBI reports and stuff like that because that's kind of a loosely titled organization. He didn't explain that at all. And it sounded like he was downplaying the violence, which, you got to be careful with that, man, because that's been the whole rub against you. And when he's like, no, it's just an idea, not an organization. It's an idea with a growing and organization. May not be as defined as others like Black Lives Matter or whatever, but like it really sounded like he was downplaying, and he didn't even really explain what he meant by that, and that's so you're going to go for something big like that and try to change the way we think about Antifa. Like, yeah, in the middle of a debate where you're constantly being interrupted, probably not the best idea. So there was a few moments like that in addition to as I mentioned, several of the sentences that didn't even make sense on their face that really kept him from being that. But I'll give it to you, Chris. Like there was a few moments where he briefly showed like some of his old spark, but I just don't know if it was enough. And I like, yeah, it certainly didn't drag it away. So, Kyle, last word on Biden, and then we'll go to some comments from our followers here.
Yeah, I thought his best moment was actually, it came maybe around probably 70, 75 minutes in, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
And it was after Trump had just been just nailing him and being argumentative with Chris Wallace. And he kind of took a breath, it seemed like, and paused and said maybe he had 3 or 4 minutes of quiet with Trump not interrupting him. And he talked about he wanted to be the president of all people and really encouraged people to get out and vote, no matter who they're voting for. And I mean, that's the kind of tone and rhetoric that you would have expected him to have the whole debate, and unfortunately, it wasn't there. But I thought he did a really well, really good job in that moment, really kind of compelling people to vote and to try to be a unifying presence. Even though when it comes to his policy, I don't believe he really is that. But he made a good job. He made a good case for
yeah.
it.
He actually like looked at the camera a few times and
Yeah,
addressed the people. I was waiting for Trump to do that. Like, look at
yeah, never happened.
Trump constantly says, "I'm the only thing between you and the government that's out to get you, or the radical left that's out to get you, whatever. Like, I'm the one standing in between, you and them." Like, but he never looked at you. He never like look at
That's
us
right.
and be
Yeah.
like, everything that I've done is for you. Like I've fought for
Hmm.
you. He was constantly talking about
Hmm.
himself. So I thought that was strange. So we're going to go into some comments here, and then we'll close out the show. But one of the things I want to do real quick, guys, before we do that, is explain to people like why we're being so critical of the debate. Obviously, like a
Yeah,
lot of people are dissatisfied, but I will tell you in what we do. And granted, like we're just three guys talking, but what we do comes at it from a very different perspective because like Chris, I don't agree with your politics. I don't, I'm obviously not a liberal myself, but I will grant you standing on this show as a person, as an American, and I'm not going to tell you to get out of the country because you happen to be a liberal. And the same thing for you, Kyle, as a libertarian. I don't, I've had friends that were libertarians. I've studied some libertarian thinkers. I don't understand it nearly as well as you, but that's your right as an American to have these beliefs and to be able to bring them. And you say something on this show, I'm going to hear you out as best as I can. And I'm going to trust in our discussion. I'm going to trust in the power of ideas and truth to come to the forefront and for us to all wrestle with it together. And I will tell you right now that I believe that this country was built by people of various beliefs, not just conservatives. Right?
that's right.
I'm a big fan of the Reagan, obviously Edmund Burke, John Adams, all these conservatives, but like Thomas Jefferson was not very conservative. Thomas Paine, less so.
Mm,
There have been people like FDR and others who came through that were not conservative really in any fashion, and yet they had important contributions to this country. I mean, talk about FDR all day. Reagan loved FDR for what he did during the Great Depression, what he did in World War II, how he pulled us together in 1941. These are important contributions by liberals, and because of them, they are a part of our history that we are trying to
that's right.
conserve. And so for me to sit here and pretend like you don't have standing in this country until you do something violent that violates the rights of others, talk, talk.
Yeah.
Like, and Biden is in that vein as well. Give the man a chance to speak because I don't agree with him. Let's rhetorically tear him apart when we get our chance, but give them standing. And we have hit a point, I believe, guys, in our political debate where that's not really the assumption or the case anymore. And in this discussion, what we can control, we're going to bring that back. And that's what we are
Yeah.
demonstrating here with you two guys on my left and right, is that we each get standing. So as we get into these comments, that's what I want to see. And that's why I think this is so important for us to talk about it right now, is not only are we criticizing these guys, and I deserve it, I believe in what we're saying, but we're also demonstrating actively the chance to do something different. So let's go into some of these comments. I want to hear what you guys think. So got both of you guys on camera now. I'll step back and you can kind of wrestle with them because I know you've been on the comment section. Bill says, any mention in the debates about the national debt, unfunded liabilities, state debt, city debt, anything about their unfunded liabilities? That didn't happen. I don't think. Would you guys have liked to have seen that, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. As a libertarian, fiscal responsibility is pretty important to me. So, yeah, I would love to see how these candidates view about government spending. Although all we have to do is just look at both of their policies and both of their voting histories to really see what they feel about government spending and how they view it. So, not a surprise that it wasn't talked about. But yeah, it would have been nice to put some people on the record.
Yeah. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm sure if Biden wins, then at the next presidential debate, when a Democrat is in office, there will be a lot of questions about unfunded liabilities and government spending.
Yeah, that's the type of policy that we would like to see, right? Is getting into that kind of debate, but more than just about the people, and more than just about like the particular individual personalities and what's making them angry at this particular time. Is getting
That's
into
right.
the substance of that. Like, don't we deserve that as Americans? As people who have invested in this country, paying our taxes, all of that. I agree. Next comment here is the two-party system. This is from Yana. Is a two-party system inconsistent with the free market philosophy? And if so, why do conservatives support it? I'll talk about the conservative piece of this. Maybe you want to talk about it from a libertarian side, Kyle. But if the two-party system is inconsistent with the free market philosophy, I guess for the question, is that the case? Would you say that this two-party system has just gotten out of control to the point that we can't actually have like true capitalism or even democracy itself? What do you guys think? So whoever wants to take that one.
Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I think that free markets are mostly good when they are true free markets and not, necessarily markets that are controlled by capitalists, which are two different things. I think that the two-party system is bad, and I think that there are definitely big structural changes we can make to both of those institutions. I'm not quite seeing the connection.
Yeah. How
How
about you,
about you?
Yeah,
Kyle?
can you read that question again? Because I think I misunderstood it a different way.
Yeah, is the two-party system inconsistent with the free market philosophy? That's the first part of it.
Yeah, so I think what he's saying is like, so the free market is all about choice, right? So as many choices as can possibly be brought to market is what the free market is about, right?
Yeah,
But in our two-party system that we only have two choices. So I think that's what
yeah,
Yana, I think that's what he's getting at is that
yeah,
the two-party system has a chokehold on who the market is for our political candidates.
yeah. I mean,
And I'd say that's absolutely the case in the same way that what we have in America is typically described as capitalism is not capitalism. It's cronyism and corporatism kind of married together in some sort of way with a heavy dose of socialism as well. Um, but yeah, I don't think that yeah, I think that the two-party system is definitely has a stranglehold on the free market of ideas in
yeah,
terms of political party
I
and
agree
capital.
with you. I mean, we're seeing the failures of the two-party system. Now it's very apparent. Um,
And I thought about this last night. Sorry to interrupt you,
fine.
Wes,
Go
but
ahead.
how would it have looked to have Joe Jorgensen on that
That's
stage last
exactly
night?
what I was thinking.
What would the dynamic? What how would that dynamic have changed? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it would have looked like in the Republican primaries when you had Kasich off to the side, while Cruz and Rubio and Trump went at it. But the
That's probably
question
true.
would be, would that have actually like entailed support? And I think in this situation, it actually would have, because at the
Yeah.
time, everyone was just fascinated with what Trump was doing, and no one really cared about like Kasich, moderate record, all that kind of stuff. They were like, this is fascinating watching this guy like burn everything down. But now living in a different situation, I think people would be more open to what Kasich's strategy was 4 years ago. That's my take. But yeah, I think about George Washington and his concerns over political parties in general, and then to get to the point where you have a dialectic solution and that's it. To get to this point, I think people are hungry for a third party, and there's just we talked about this extensively, Kyle. There's just not one that's in place to take advantage of that, and some of that is because of the corporate nature of politics and how much money is in it and how exclusive it is, right? But you see things like what we're doing right now. It's like doing our little show and things like that. People have more and more access to the type of production quality. Obviously we're still working up to that some of these big giants have. So maybe that could change, but man, I just don't know. Last question, and then we'll call it a night, guys. And I just kind of agreed with this sentiment from Hunter. Hunter says the debate was a disappointment. He said, I'm going to vote for our president regardless, but his inability to articulate his accomplishments, which would persuade undecided, is a bit of a bummer. Instead of being calm and precisely reminding everyone of his successes, he focused on his anger towards the media, and I think he means that alone. That pretty much sums up what I think as a conservative. So, Chris, I want to give you, a last word here on this, and then we'll go to Kyle, and I'll close this out.
Well, he did focus on some of his successes, but a lot of them were embellished or misleading. Chris Wallace and Joe Biden really had to counter him when he brought up his economic numbers and the fact that there were actually more jobs created in the last 3 years of the Obama administration than there were under Trump. People talk about Trump's miraculous economic recovery, but there is literally no graph that shows that happening. Every economic graph that you look at shows his economic data following trends that were set under Obama, and in many cases, decelerating
Yeah.
those trends. So I think you mentioned he wasn't really speaking to Americans; he was just speaking about himself. A really common critique of the Trump campaign is that it is way too online. It is a campaign that is run for Twitter and for Trump's Twitter base. Whereas Joe Biden is running a very not online campaign. He's not conceding a lot to the online leftists. He's not talking about these crazy conspiracy theories. So, Trump went on stage to talk about Hunter Biden and illegal coups and witch hunts and, the specific intricacies of FISA requests or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah. Biden was talking about issues that affect real Americans. So I think that is a very strong contrast. My students brought up the debate unsolicited today in the chat. I teach eighth graders through distance learning online. And I asked them, what did you think about what you watched? And a lot of students said, oh, it was really funny. And so, that's where we are as a country right now, where children are laughing at the adults that are supposed to be role models. And I don't give away my political affiliation. I don't endorse any candidate to my students because we write about political issues sometimes, and I think it's very important to help to allow them to come to their own conclusions, to teach them critical thinking, but not give them my biased partisan perspective. But I did tell them, a lot of what we saw on that stage last night are things that we, your teachers and your parents, teach you not to do. We teach you not to interrupt, not to bully, not to yell, not to insult each other's families. And so, I try very hard not to make it clear what candidate I am endorsing, but I did tell them, whoever is president should be a role model to children. And teaching students that bullying is wrong and how to spot the signs of a bully or an abuser is not a partisan stance. And I just feel really bad because these kids are coming of age at a time when the presidency means nothing. It is not something that they are looking up to. It's not something that they are aspiring to. It's not something that they are looking with awe at. And that's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking as a kid who looked up to presidents from all parties. When I was in eighth grade, my idol was George W. Bush. And I look back and, I became much more critical of him in high school. But I still can look back at him now and see him as a decent man who made a lot of mistakes. But yeah, it's heartbreaking that this is where we are as a country, I think, where it's nothing but division and hate.
I think that one of the major justifications for Trump being harsh and politically incorrect and all of those things early on was, I have to do this in order to break up the swamp, the establishment, all of that, the structure that is in place. And if I don't do this, then no one's going to pay attention. If I'm just calm and reasonable and all that stuff and I'm in the shadows, like, it's never going to work. I'm going to play the media against themselves because they can't stop looking at someone who colors outside the lines. They're just, they're drawn to it because of the sensationalism, and it worked so well, and it was captivating to see because the response to what you're saying, Chris, and I definitely understand, at least to some degree where you're coming from, but the response to that is that a lot of people see politics as fake, and they see all these polished, politicians who are careerists and saying all the right things, but then they don't actually mean it. And the notion was Trump is going to break it, and you can see that because of how he talks and how he's willing to do things that no one else will do. that was the justification. And it was like, I'm doing this on behalf of you to break up this corporate, like crony capitalism that's at the top. But that justification doesn't quite hold water when you are the president, when you have just nominated another conservative Supreme Court justice who has a good chance of making it and replacing a liberal and are now in the driver's seat. If anything, this is your chance to like take your victory lap and say we're going to do it again and look at all we've done. Much like what I was just quoting there from Hunter and his comments, is you would expect that is like, I delivered, I did all of these things. And yet, to play the little guy, to play the underdog in this situation is just mind boggling and counterintuitive to common sense, especially if you do it to the point that the corrupt media and the evil Democrats can't even get a word out. How are they supposed to be the evil bad guys if you don't even know what they were going to say? And so just unbelievable that dynamic has shifted and that he hasn't shifted with it. If anything, he's regressed. And I just thought that was shocking. It doesn't mean that it's over. It doesn't mean the election is done. There's still several weeks before we get into it really. But yeah, I mean that's really how I see it. And I can understand where you're coming from, and it's not just disappointing. I would say for you, it's disappointing for someone like me, because when you go from looking at the camera and saying I'm doing this for you to hey, I'm more doing this for myself or for whatever reason, then you lose a lot of that justification, and then all of a sudden there is no ends that you can use to justify the means, if that makes sense. So Kyle, go ahead, last word, brother, and then we're done.
Yeah, so as absurd and glorious and fun and unwatchable and as much of a dumpster fire inside of a train wreck of a hot mess as that whole situation was last night, and as much as we wanted to talk about it today because we all had pretty strong reactions as we were watching and listening to it last night, I don't think it moves the needle at all. The status quo remains unaffected, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, or should be the desired result from a national debate where everyone just stays entrenched in their ideas and the moderates remain, unaffected. So
you still hold to your
there you
prediction?
go.
You still think Trump's going to win the popular vote and is going to sweep the election, much like or at least to some extent, as 2016?
Yeah, as of now, I think I may change that after the next debate if it's as bad as this one. But largely, I'm unaffected in my prediction by this. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Well, hey, thank you guys so much for your time, for doing this on the fly. I know we've all got like our day jobs and everything else going on, like you're talking about. Chris and Kyle and myself have it too. But I just thought this was a great opportunity, and once again, we have demonstrated not only a criticism of the status quo, but what the solution looks like and the type of conversations that should be had and the substance. I appreciate everybody who logged in. We got an enormous amount of comments on this already, and I know some folks are going to check it out afterwards. So if you're enjoying this show, Refounding Fathers, we do several on our channel at theberkingconservative.com. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Check us out. Send us a message if you've got additional questions for Kyle, Chris, or myself. Just shoot them our way. We'll do this show again in a week or two. And we'll see what the polling says. We'll see what the vice presidential debate does. And then we'll meet back here. And once again, we'll have an amazing discussion just like this one. So thanks, guys. Have a great night. And I'll see you soon.
Thank you.